The relationship between China and Eritrea. And it has developed to a strategic partnership on a number of issues. My meeting with President Xi Jinping is a continuation of that long-standing history of partnership, strategic partnership with China.
Mr. President, this year marks the 30th anniversary of diplomatic relations between China and Eritrea. And during your meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping, he quoted a Chinese proverb, 30而立, which means at the age of 30, one planted his or her feet firm upon the ground. So for you, how would you define this bilateral relations, and how do you think we can not only enhance the traditional political friendship, but also inject new impetus into the economic cooperation between the two sides?
From our perspective, it's a historic mission of humanity. Why the People's Republic of China stood on the right of the Eritrean people to independence immediately after independence, 1949, is historic. Independence of nations and peoples, which is the foundation of any cooperation program, economic or otherwise. That is the foundation of the relationship. Now, it's not only Eritrea and China, but we work together to influence the emergence of a new global order, which is again a mission for humanity. And China stands on the side of the peoples of the world. Eritrea, in solidarity with China, continues to uphold a mission for humanity.
Welcome to Drive for Africa. China's influence in Africa is undeniable. But what are their true intentions? This video delves into China's policies on respecting African sovereignty and examines how they plan to boost East Africa's economy and stability in the years to come. Join us as we explore the complexities of this growing relationship. China is investing heavily in Africa. But does this partnership truly benefit African nations? This video investigates China's commitment to respecting Africa's sovereignty while exploring their ambitious plans to drive economic growth and stability in East Africa. We'll uncover the facts and ask the critical questions. China's engagement with Africa is a multifaceted phenomenon. This video analyzes China's policies on respecting African sovereignty within the context of the economic initiatives in East Africa. We'll examine the potential benefits and challenges of this growing partnership, offering a balanced perspective on its impact. Let's begin.
During the FOCAC meeting, President Xi Jinping of China announced the 6th initiative and 10 partnership programs to advance, to join hands together with our African friends to advance the modernization. He also announced some projects which can benefit people quickly, small projects which are suitable to Somali. And also President Mohammed himself raised some projects. We discussed all about it. And our embassy here, of course, will follow up with department concerned of Somali to discuss the way to implement this outcome. China support the national development and social progress of Somali. We encourage Chinese enterprises to come to invest, to build infrastructure where the security situation allows. For the moment, we concentrate on small projects which can benefit people quickly. So that's the content we discuss about the mutual cooperation. Thank you very much. I also talked with the President and Foreign Minister about the Chinese proposal, the outlook for peace and development in the Horn of Africa. This proposal was put forward by Chinese government 2 years ago. The main purpose is to encourage regional countries in the Horn region to gather together to discuss about the zoning issues in a peaceful manner, to resolve their differences through dialogue. The most important thing is to get rid of outside influence resolve their differences through peaceful means by themselves. So there are three pillars in outlook. One is peace, development, and governance, the three areas. So we encourage, we support the regional countries to hold peace conference to resolve their differences. This year in Beijing, in July this year, the second peace conference was held, and we discussed about the possibility to hold the third peace conference next year in the Hong region. And we have not decided in which country yet, but we'll consult the regional countries extensively to hold the third peace conference in order to better implement the outlook.
又是中国人民的老朋友。刚才我们在路上都谈到你在中国的情景，你对中国有深厚的感情。我对你的来访表示热烈欢迎。中国和俄亥利亚传统友谊深厚，两国在俄亥利亚建国当天就建立外交关系。今年5月24日，我们将迎来两国建交30周年纪念日。中国人常说30而立，我们要以此为契机，推动两国关系实现更好发展。
Your Excellency Xi Jinping, President of the People's Republic of China, allow me first to express my profound gratitude for the kind invitation that Your Excellency has extended to me. The highest impact that was the support of the People's Republic of China extended to the struggle of the Eritrean people for independence. Even though Eritrea and China established formal diplomatic ties in 1993, their practical strategic ties of friendship and cooperation had begun in earnest before 60 years. In this context, let me extend our profound gratitude to the Communist Party of China.
China's security strategy is essentially built around China's expanding economic interest and China's economic activities. I think when the late Jiang Zemin came in with his going out strategy, Chinese state-owned enterprises really became the engines or the vehicles of Chinese foreign policy to a very large extent. And I think there was a realization within the security establishment in Beijing that this outward expansion, I mean over 10,000 companies, cumulatively in Africa, were expanding in an environment, in an environment that was highly unstable in critical areas. I mean, we saw the situation in Libya, where the People's Liberation Army had to use assets to get people out. We saw it in Yemen. We saw the situation in South Sudan. So increasingly, Chinese investments, not just on the continent of Africa, but other parts of the global South, are having to contend with these security challenges. So I think this is one of the key drivers. However, I think it's important to remember that China has also been positioning itself to become a major contributor to peacekeeping operations. And because we all know that peacekeeping operations, peacekeeping is essentially an African, peacekeeping is essentially African, because most of the world's deployed peacekeepers are African, right, and most of the UN peacekeeping operations are based in Africa. So it was highly strategic in the sense that China, to develop that leading role as a peacekeeper, China had to pass through Africa, to learn from Africa, to learn those techniques, to learn how it is like to operate in a peacekeeping environment. So when the establishment of the military base in Djibouti, the messaging that we heard from the Chinese government was that that facility was basically put in place to facilitate Chinese peacekeeping operations, African peacekeeping operations to some extent. And China has also been involved with counter-piracy operations since 2008. So what I would see, emerging from the lesson of Djibouti, and looking at the kind of security challenges that the PLA is having to confront, is a blended security approach, where you have a combination of peacekeeping, you have a combination of very, very strong political ties with African governments, to such an extent that some of these governments are providing assets to be able to protect Chinese interest and to be able to protect joint interest. I mean, all the FOCAC agreements that have been signed, at least since 2015, have included this element of protecting assets, protecting interests of state-owned enterprises. So I would see China pursuing a very mixed security strategy. It is generating concern internationally, but if we look at if we read into the conversations that are happening within the PLA, the kind of model that the Chinese are interested, at least certainly coming from authoritative sources within China, is very mixed. I don't think that the Chinese are interested in necessarily copying or cutting and pasting, for instance, the Belgian, the French, the German, and the American basing models in Africa. What if we look very, very carefully at Djibouti, and if we listen very carefully to the conversations that are happening in Beijing, it is sort of moving towards a very mixed approach, a very, very mixed approach. So that's certainly how I see China's military strategy developing on the African continent.
It's played a critical role in world peace. As you know, it supports the United Nations peace missions and several other interventions, but largely its demeanor for the win-win solutions across the world, and for its the Road and Belt program that was rolled out basically to embrace the interconnectedness of all humankind. And you could see China offering itself to the world, and the world embracing China in that process. It was not for self-interest, but for world interest, and therefore for all of humanity. And that is why this program has become more a contributory factor towards world peace. For China-Africa development and cooperation, it's an important forum because it has assisted us in many respects, particularly with regard to the coordination of efforts by various governments at continental level, the AU coordination.
Since around 2015, 2016, we have started to see this decline quite precipitously. There's a lot of data sets that have shown this. The lending from the two major policy banks really plateaued in the later half of the decade, and then over the last few years, even prior to the COVID pandemic, was a fraction of what it used to be. Some of that, may be a response to the growing kind of negative perceptions and the criticisms, and we discussed in the last section the meme of debt trap that's become, I think, misapplied to a lot of Chinese lending overseas. But a lot of it is internal, and so whether or not the BRI is dead really depends on the evolution and the shape of the Chinese economy over the next few years. So Chinese railways in Africa was a manifestation outward of Chinese railways in China. Right? When you have this huge, massive investment domestically, inevitably that will spill over overseas. But what we're seeing right now in China, in terms of the trends of investment, it's in renewable energy. It's in these new frontier technologies. And so over the next few years, what may become of the BRI could take a very different format to what we saw in the last decade. And in the areas of climate finance and renewable energy and these kind of technologies, I think could be a new frontier of what the BRI becomes. But just to add as well, the BRI is no longer the only game in town, and perhaps as a consequence of some of the negative PR that's afflicted China's overseas lending over the last few years, we've also seen a new plethora of platforms for cooperation, some of them announced just in the last year. So we have the new Global Development Initiative that's around 1 year old, and then the Global Security Initiative that was announced earlier this year. And domestically, there's a slightly different configuration of who is going to be leading that or who is going to be driving it in terms of the ministries involved. But it also offers a slightly different flavor of cooperation that's a lot more focused on poverty reduction, on the sort of, the traditional OECD DAC narrative of development. So there will be more cooperation in other areas like health and agriculture that we'll see through these other platforms.